Okay, today we're going to do a test and an overview of this Vatrer battery. Vatrer sent me this battery for free for testing because they've seen my videos. The reason why I accepted this battery to do it, I don't normally do battery reviews, but I have a buddy down at the dock who's on a fixed income, retirement income, who's redoing his boat. So when I'm done testing this battery, it's going to go to him. I've already spilled the beans to him, so he knows he's going to get it. But when I'm done with it, he's going to get it. But in the meantime, we're going to do a full test on this. Check out the app, check out the build quality. We'll put it on the machine behind us to do several cap checks, and we'll check out the general quality of this battery. And I'll give my honest opinion on it. So, all right, let's get started. All right, let's see what we've got here. A little while, so let's see how low it got. Some good packaging. We have some terminal bolts. Look a little short, but they're probably fine. Manual, and then a big honking battery. And we do have handles, so let me work on getting this battery out of here. Alright, that looks pretty nice. It's low and wide, and I could probably get some measurements here. Alright, I like these rope handles. So let's hook up the app and we'll take a look at it. Okay, we're going to demonstrate the app. I've already downloaded it from the App Store. Here is the tab for that. It's got some pretty colors. There is the battery. Bluetooth has to be on. Location services has to be on. Toggle the battery on so you can connect your device to the battery. And then it only has two tabs down here, dashboard and about. We'll take a look at the dashboard first. So the battery has 51% on it, 153.8 of 300 amp hours. It shows the position of the charge and discharge MOSFETs. You cannot toggle those off. And then it has protections. I suppose if there was any type of over voltage, over current, over temperature, it would tell you there with a warning label of what type of warning it is. Balancing is off. That should be on only at the upper range. We'll test that. And then it shows voltage, current, which we have none right now, power, which is volts times current equals power, or watts. That's why there's a little W there. This is the cell information. So there's a volt high, volt low, voltage differential. Right now we have 0.004 volt difference, which is what you should see in a mid-level voltage range for a battery like this. And then voltage average, and we've got one cycle. I do like this, that it shows the temperatures, T1, T2, T3. It shows the min and max. See, it just bounced around a little bit because they're pretty much the same. But it identifies the MOSFET by itself. It's nice to know which one's the MOSFET. It's really not hard to identify on most other batteries that may not identify it, because the MOSFET is going to be the one that heats up first, either in charge or discharge. And then it's got the individual cells. Now about, it only has, the only thing that I can see that's useful here is you can change it between Celsius or Fahrenheit, and you have to confirm it. And so it does give you that option. Let me make sure there's nothing there. So version number and of course language. So pretty basic, but pretty useful information there. So let's we're going to put it on the bench back there, and we will charge it and then do some capacity tests. All right. Nice sturdy handles, not too heavy. All right, we're using this power supply from Amazon. Very nice to have them. This one goes up to 60 volts, 1200 watts. At 12 volts, or as you see here, 13.82, the only thing, the maximum I can get out of this, power supply is 21 amps, or about 300 watts, a little less than 300 watts. If you want to buy one of these, this one's a little expensive now because it goes up to 60 volts. This one goes up to 30 volts and is good for 20 amps. They're a little over $100. They are fantastic to have laying around. I've also got the Victron charger I could use, but we're just going to let it charge up nice and slow. As I said, we've got 13.84 volts coming out of this power supply, 21 amps. We have 21 amps coming into the battery, but at 13.3 volts. We're getting some losses through this wire here. That's why that says 13.86 and this says 13.3. But anyways, we're just, and probably in these cheap clips, but that's okay. We'll get it charged up eventually. It's not too critical for this test. As you can see though, it says 276 watts of power. We got 290 there. So there's a little bit of losses over the wire and the cheap alligator clips and whatnot. We're going to charge this to, I think I have set 14.4 for now. We're just going to see if we can get up to 14.4, see how balanced the cells are at that point, check out our voltage differential, and then we'll see where we are. Alright, we'll have to come back here in a while. I don't see any time to go information. For instance, some apps will give you a time to go if you are charging at 20.6 amps, how many amp hours you would have left to go in the remaining capacity. Alright, I didn't want to wait that long. So now we are charging with 50 amps because I have my 21 amps here, and I went ahead and hooked up the 30 amp IP22 Victron charger. Best charger on the market for the money. Best 30 amps of charging that you can get for the money. So anyways, we are now, it's going to take us about 3 hours, so I want to get this done tonight. Alright, currently charging with very little current there, and I backed the voltage down to 14.2. Got very little amperage going into the battery, but the balancing is on because we have a little bit of a cell differential on the initial charge, but balancing is on. I'm going to let it sit here at where are we at 14.2. Now this shows 0 amps coming in, but this says otherwise. So a lot of times on apps or drop-in batteries, the amp detection current threshold, how many amps the BMS can see, it doesn't detect extremely small current. So if you see 0 amps, that may not be true. As you can see, we have a few amps going in. In addition, balancing is on. Now I might just bump this up on the voltage. Let's see where we are here. Just a hair. 14.22, and you see the amps go up a little bit. Now that caused balancing to go off. I don't know why. It may detect charging, that's why. Okay, let me turn that back down. So this tells you a little clue about how it balances. So now it goes back on. So that's okay. We will let it cook and balance for a little while until the cell voltage differential calms down. You can see one cell is at 3604, 3606, and then this one's lagging a bit. This one's 3549. So it needs a little bit of work. Now I'm gonna manually balance it using these methods, but if you just put this in something and you just cycle it a bunch of times, it's going to eventually balance. But we'll confirm that it will actually balance on the bench here, and we'll make sure that it can get in balance and that there's not a cell problem. But it's not unusual to see a little bit of a voltage differential on the first charge. Anyways, alright, we'll come back to this after it's balanced for I don't know, 8-10 hours. We'll see how long it takes. Okay, we let it balance overnight. We're pretty much not pulling any current. It might pop on here and there a little bit, very low current now and then. Balancing just shut off, and we are at a VDIF of 14 millivolts. So I let this sit overnight. We started pretty high, around 200 millivolts, and then I just let it sit for a while. I backed it down to 14.3, and of course as the battery gets full at 14.3, the current will begin to naturally drop just as a result of the way the cells behave, and the VDIF over the course of about 12 hours came down. So this is good. I'm just gonna stop charging here, and we're gonna cap check it right from here. I've already got the iTech 8514C Plus hooked up, so we're gonna shut off all the chargers. We'll disconnect the charger, so in case there's any kind of backfeeding of current or something, shouldn't be, but just in case, we'll isolate it just to the capacity tester, and then we'll do a capacity test right now. Okay, as you can see, it says 100%, 300 amp hour of 300 amp hour. Our voltage is 14.4. It's falling from the 14.5 we just had it at, and it's absorbed fully. So this is going to be about as maximum capacity as you could possibly get. You don't need to absorb that fully every time, and you'll still get pretty much full capacity. So we will go shift battery. How many amps do we want to do? 50 amps. Stop volts is 0 because the BMS is going to do the stopping. Capacity is 999. It's just exceedingly high, again because the voltage in the BMS will do the stopping of this test. Timer is exceedingly long. Save battery file and turn it on. Okay. Alright, so amp hours right there to 3 decimals. We're pulling 49.97 amps. It's going to take a while. As you can see, we're already dropping a little bit. It's not a huge load on it, but 50 amps is probably a kind of average load that you might see in an RV or a boat, unless you're running an air conditioner or microwave or something like that. A lot of times you won't even see 49 amps. So this is very representative of a real life test. We'll let it go. I'm just about ready to cross 1 amp already. 1 amp hour, I should say. So we'll come back and check this when it's done. There we go, 299 amp hours. Alright, we're still continuing the test, just checking in. Down to 17% SOC, which is, where is it? 51.4 amp hours left of 300. We're not anywhere near the lower knee, so cell balance is still very good. MOSFET temperature is a little elevated because it's kind of hot in here and it's got a 50 amp load on it. The test equipment has settled at exactly 50 amps for quite some time. We're at 247 amp hours, 247 and a half, and it says we have 51 to go. That doesn't add up to 300, but one thing that we'll probably watch here is that SOC, and these numbers are not exact, more than likely this will continue past 0% SOC, and even when that says 0 amp hours of 300, it will probably continue to discharge. These numbers here, SOC, pretty much every battery that has an app, they're a convenience item and they are not perfect. So just keep that in mind. Always balance SOC with voltage. Kind of cross-check them. Now right now this is dragged down a bit because I have a 50 amp load on it. But if you check them with no load, you can tell approximately where you are in SOC. It's very difficult to tell where you are if you're, say, 20% to 90%, because the voltage is so flat in that range. But it's easy to tell when you're approaching the lower knee or are deep in the lower knee or deep in the upper knee. It's easy to tell that. So, if you have an SOC of 50%, but your voltage is down around 12 volts, well, you're in trouble and your SOC is off. It just needs to be recharged to full to recalibrate. So anyways, we'll check back later. Alright, we're still going. Down to 4%. 13 amp hours remaining. Got 285 amp hours and change coming out already. So if you add those two numbers together, it seems like we're going to come up short 300 amp hours. But again, to demonstrate that SOC is not always accurate, it's probably going to continue past 0%. And we'll come back and show that on video here in just a second. Okay, still going. Says 0 SOC, 0 amp hours remaining, still discharging 50 amps. Total voltage is 12.4. The cell voltage average is still above 3, so we still have a little ways to go. Let's take a look at all the cells. They're just fine. Let's see here. differential's starting to grow because we're getting close to the lower knee. But just to show, and this not a knock on this battery, all batteries will do that have an internal SOC calculation or mechanism to calculate SOC, an internal shunt to calculate it. Many reasons. Number one, because they have 300 amp hours. This battery is probably going to be more than 300 amp hours, but still, it's at 0, and we have not reached 300 amp hours yet. So, you know, it's just due to several factors. These things are never perfect, so don't rely on them. And it can be off in one direction like this, but it can be off in the other direction too, where sometimes it has 50% SOC or 25% SOC, and then all of a sudden the battery shuts down. And that's usually because of SOC drift. To resync these batteries, you need to charge them to full. I don't know what the SOC reset is on this battery, but it's probably 14.2 or 14.3 volts. But anyways, okay, we're over 300 now. And I got to show you that point about SOC. Everything's looking good. MOSFET temperature's fine. Again, VDIF is starting to grow. Nothing left to do but to let it go until the discharge MOSFET turns off, which will happen at probably either 10 or 10.5 volts here, or possibly 2.5 volts on whichever cell gets to that point first. So we just have to let it go till something shuts down, and we'll do another video at that point and see where we're at. 310 amp hours, still going. We're going to take it all the way to low voltage cutoff. If you have lead acid and you're thinking about making the switch, it really is a game changer. You just have to do it. You can buy this brand. I'm already convinced this brand is fine. It can be whatever brand, but make sure it's a quality brand. But make the switch. 312, pretty good. But we're getting close to hitting 10 volts here. V low has dropped below 2.3 on the lowest cell. Wasn't even paying attention. It's got to be shutting down any second now. Any second, it's got to be shutting down. 9.9 volts. If not, I'm gonna shut it down. Many times it's like 10 volts, but it has a time component, like say 10 volts or below for 10 seconds or 15 seconds. That prevents nuisance trips if you're getting low. So I don't really know exactly what triggered it. It was probably that 10 volts, and of course the discharge MOSFET. So what did we get? 313.226 amp hours. Okay, so let's initialize the testing. We've got 79 amps being pulled there. Shows about 80 there. Okay, so the additional draw is going to be using the variac and this heater. So we'll power this up. So we're up to 116 right now. So let's dial up this variac. Let it all stabilize. So you can see the watts that we're pulling is 2200 watts. Let that stabilize a second. 200, overshoot a little bit. I'm going to try to get it exactly as close as I can. That resistance will vary a little bit, so we're going to let it settle down. But this is the first time I've used this test method, and it looks like it's going to be pretty viable though. So between this electronic load, this variac, and this 2000 watt inverter, and something like a heater, I can do that. So we're pretty consistent at 199.8, 199.6. Looks like we've stabilized a little bit. About 2575 watts, 2572. Alright, that's pretty stable. So again, here's the rig. We've got the electronic load. We're setting up a load for 80 amps. Right now we're at 79.99. Then in addition, we have the 2000 watt inverter going through the variac so that we can adjust it. And it looks like it's working pretty good. I'll have to adjust it up just a hair. Well, I don't know. Let me just see if I can adjust it up a hair. I'll probably overshoot. The control on this variac is pretty good, but That's pretty good. We're just going to leave it alone. Alright, let's let it run. We'll come back to it. I have no doubt that this is going to go the remainder and not have a discharge MOSFET shutdown or a exceedance of any type. Let's see, cells are starting to split a little bit. So, you know, under a big load, that's not unusual, and that's probably not excessive there. Alright, we'll continue down to 20%. Won't take long. Alright, so we're at 20% SOC. Still pulling a little bit over 200 amps, 2550 watts. Discharge MOSFET still on. No protections. Still over 3.1 volts. VDIF is 24. Still over 200 amps. Temperatures are pretty warm. 156 degrees Fahrenheit on the MOSFET, 125 on the cells. Cell temperatures probably more than you want to see, but it's not unusual necessarily. I think you look at cell ratings from cell manufacturers and they were approaching those limits, but it did hit the rated discharge capacity that it says, and it did it from 100% to 20%. So, and it would make it to 0, I'm pretty sure. So overall, it's a pretty good battery for the price. The capacity was very good. Discharged good. I didn't test cold weather charging or anything like that. I'm assuming it works. But overall, seems to be a pretty good battery for the money. So, alright, that's it. We'll have more later. And I'm going to take this down to my buddy. Trying to revive an old Hart interface inverter charger that's his. Normally this wouldn't be a good piece of equipment to use with that battery. However, I'm at least going to test what the battery voltage output is, because if you read some of the presets on this whole thing, they actually could be used. For instance, the absorption voltage is 14.4 on some, with a float voltage of 13.5 or 13.4. So I'll test it. If I can find a preset, he has the controller, the remote. If I can find a preset that works, then he might be able to use this. At the very least, maybe I'll hook him up with the IP22 Victron charger, so he can do that, and then discharge or invert through this thing if it works. It's a dinosaur, but we'll see what happens.